off on Friday. We're going to be watching any of our books on later. I've been posting the links.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. If you guys want to just switch yourself real quick, we can start where we left off. We're almost halfway through already, actually. So this chapter was called A Temporary Human. So when we left off on Friday, Ivan was just telling about how they captured him and remember his sister Tag, and then Tag did not make it. So temporary human. It was Mac who pried open my crate. Mac who bought me, and Mac who raised me like a human baby. I wore diapers. I drank from a bottle. I slept in a human bed. I sat in human chairs. I listened while human words swarmed around me like angry bees. Mac had a wife back then, Helen. She was quick to laugh, but quick to anger too, especially when I broke something, which was often. Here's what I broke while I lived with Mac and Helen. So I'll show you and then I'll read them to you, but you can see he's got a whole list of everything he broke when he lived at Mac and Helen's house. I broke 1 crib, 46 glasses, 7 lamps, 1 couch, 3 shower curtains, 3 shower curtain rods, 1 blender, 1 TV, 1 radio, and 3 toes. Those were my own toes. I broke the blender when I squeezed 3 tubs of toothpaste and a bottle of glue in it. I broke my toes when I was attempting to swing from the lamp fixture on the ceiling. And I broke 46 glasses. Well, it turns out there's a lot of ways you can break a glass. Every weekend, Mac and Helen took me in their convertible to a fast food restaurant where they ordered me French fries and strawberry milkshake. Mac loved to see the expression on the cashier's face when we drove up and said, "Hey, can I have an extra ketchup for my kid?" Can you imagine if you went to the McDonald's drive-thru with the gorilla in your car? I went to baseball games. I went to the grocery store. I even went to the movie theater and to the circus. They didn't have a gorilla there. I rode my little motorbike and blew out candles on my birthday cake. My life as a human was a glamorous one, although my parents, the traditional sorts, would not have approved. Oh, look, there's a picture of baby Ivan in his diaper. Man, I wish I could have a pet gorilla in a diaper at home. Next time I do a Google Meet with you guys, I'll just have my gorilla right here. The next chapter is called Hunger. In my new life as a human, I was well tended. I ate lettuce leaves with Thousand Island dressing and caramel apples and popcorn with butter, and my belly ballooned. But hunger, like food, came in many shapes and colors. At night, laying alone in my Winnie the Pooh pajamas, I felt hungry for the skilled touch of a grooming friend and for the cheerful grunts of a play fight, and I longed for the easy safety of the nearby troop foraging through the shadows. Remember what happened to Tag, I told myself. Don't think about the jungle. Still, sometimes I lay awake wishing for the warmth of another just like me, asleep in a night nest of tender prayer plant leaves. I liked having sips of soda pop poured in my mouth like a bubbling waterfall, but every now and then I longed for the search of a tender stalk of arrowroot, and to feel the tease of a mango just out of reach. So the next chapter is called Still Life. One day, Helen came home with something large and flat and wrapped in brown paper. "Look what I bought today," she said excitedly as she tore off the paper. "A painting to go in the living room over the couch." "Fruit in a bowl," Max said with a shrug. "Big deal." "This is fine art," said Helen. "It's called Still Life, and I think it's lovely." I dashed over to examine the painting, marveling at the colors and shapes. "See," said Mac, "Ivan likes it." "Ivan likes to roll up his poop and throw it at the squirrels," said Mac. I couldn't take my eyes off the apples and bananas and the grapes in the picture. They looked so real and so inviting and so edible. I reached out to touch the grape, but Helen slapped my hand real quick. "Bad boy, Ivan, don't touch." She jerked her thumb at Mac. "Hey, honey, can you go get a hammer and a nail, would ya?" While Mac and Helen were busy in the living room, I wandered in the kitchen. A cake was covered in a thick chocolate frosting, and it sat on the counter. I like cake. I love it, in fact. But it wasn't eating that I was thinking about. It was painting. The frosting peaked and dipped like tiny waves on a pond. It looked rich and gooey and dark and smooth. It looked like... What's the cake frosting look like? What do you think? Anyone have a guess? It looked like...
Chocolate.
It looked like mud. Scooped up a handful of frosting, and then I scooped up another, and I headed to the refrigerator door. It was perfect. Empty, white, like a waiting canvas. The frosting wasn't as easy to work with as jungle mud. It was stickier and, of course, more tempting to eat, but I kept at it. I scraped off every last bit of frosting, and I may have eaten a little bit of cake, too. I don't remember what I was trying to paint. Maybe a banana. I suppose I knew I was going to get in trouble. But at that moment, I didn't care. I wanted to make something, anything the way I used to. I wanted to be an artist again. Next chapter is called Punishment. I soon learned that humans can screech even louder than monkeys. And after that, I was never allowed in the kitchen again. Imagine if your mom walked in the kitchen and you covered their entire refrigerator with a tub of chocolate frosting. Next chapter is called Babies. Back in those days, the Big Top Mall was smaller. It had a pony ride and a wooden train that bustled around the parking lot, and a few bed-dragged parrots and a Shirley spider monkey. But when Mac brought me, a baby gorilla dressed in a crisp tuxedo, to the mall, everything changed. People came from far and wide to have their pictures taken with me. They brought me blocks and a toy guitar, and they held me in their laps. Once I even held a human baby in my lap. She was small and slippery, and bubbles flowed from her lips. She squeezed my fingers, and her rear end was puffy with padding, and her legs bowed like bent twigs. I made a face. She made a face. I grunted. She grunted. I was so afraid she would fall that I squeezed her tightly, and then the human mother yanked her away. I wonder if my mother ever worried about dropping us. We always held on, but that's easier to do when your mom is so furry. Human babies are ugly, though. But their eyes, they're like our gorilla baby eyes. Too big for their faces and for the whole world. Next chapter is called Beds. One day, after many weeks of loud talking, Helen packed a bag and she slammed the front door and she never came back. I don't know why. I don't know the why of humans. That night, I slept with Mac in his bed. My old nests were woven of leaves and sticks, and they were shaped like a bathtub of cool green cocoons. Mac's bed, like mine, was flat and hot, and there was no sticks, and you couldn't see the stars. Still, he made a sleeping sound like the rumble my dad used to make when all was well, a sound from deep inside his belly. The next chapter is called My Place. Mac grew sullen and sad. I grew bigger. I became what I was meant to be, too large for chains and chairs, and too strong for hugs, and too big for human life. I tried to stay calm, and I tried to move with dignity. I did my best to eat daintily, but humans are hard to learn, especially when you're not a human. When I saw my new domain, I was thrilled, and who wouldn't have been? It had no furniture to break, no glass to smash, no toilets to drop Mac's keys in. I even had a tire swing. I was relieved to have my own place, but somehow I didn't realize I would be here quite so long. Now I drink Pepsi and eat old apples and watch reruns on TV. But many days I forget what I'm supposed to be. Am I a human? Or am I a gorilla? Humans have so many words, more than they really need. But still, they have no name for what I am. And here is Ivan's little tire swing. Next chapter is called 9,876 Days. Ruby's finally asleep, and I watch her chest rise and fall. Bob, too, is snoring. But my mind is still racing. For perhaps the first time ever, I've been remembering. It's an odd story to remember, I have to admit. My story has a strange shape. A stunted beginning and an endless middle. I count all the days I've lived with humans. Gorillas count as well as anyone else, although it's not a particularly useful skill to be able to count in the wild. I've forgotten so many things, and yet I always know precisely how many days I've been in my domain. I take one of the magic markers Julia gave me, and I make an X, a small one, on my painted jungle wall. I make more X's and more. I make an X for every day of my life with humans. My X marks look like this. So there's his X marks, those little ones on top. And for the rest of the night, I mark the days, and when I'm done, my entire wall looks like this. 9,876 days. And so on, until there are 9,876 X's marching across my wall like a parade of ugly insects. Next chapter is called A Visit. It's almost morning when I hear footsteps. It's Mac. He has a sharp smell and he weaves as he walks. He stands next to my domain, and his eyes are red, and he's staring out the window at the empty parking lot. Ivan, my man, he mumbles. Ivan. He pushes his forehead against the glass. We've been through a lot, you and me. I'll read one more chapter. It's called A New Beginning. We don't see Mac for 2 days, and when he returns, he doesn't talk about the fella. Mac says he's anxious to teach Ruby some tricks. He says the billboard is bringing in more visitors, and he says it's time for a new beginning. All afternoon and into the evening, Mac works with Ruby. Ruby's feet are looped with a rope so she can't run, and a heavy chain hangs off her neck. Mac shows her Stella's ball and her pedestal and her stool, and he introduces her to Snickers, the dog. When Ruby obeys Mac, he gives her a cube of sugar or a dried bit of apple. When she doesn't, he yells and kicks sawdust at her. When George and Julia arrive, Mac is still training Ruby. Julia sits on a bench and watches them, and she draws a little, but mostly she keeps her eye on Ruby. Bob watches too. He's hiding in the corner of my domain underneath Knot Tag. It's raining outside, and Bob does not like damp feet. Ruby trudges behind Mac, her head drooping. Endlessly, they circle the ring. Sometimes Mac slaps her flank with his hands. Suddenly, Ruby jerks to a stop. Mac pulls the chain hard, but Ruby doesn't move. Come on, Ruby, Mac says. What is your problem? She's exhausted, I say to myself. That's the problem. Mac groans. Idiot elephant. Idiot human, Bob mutters. Walk, Ruby, I say. Although I know she's too far away to hear me. Do what he says. Walk, Mac commands. Now. Ruby doesn't walk. She plops her rump on the sawdust floor. I think she's tired, Julia says. Mac wipes his forehead on the back of his arm. Yeah, I know, we're all tired. He pushes Ruby with the heel of his boot. She ignores him. George looks over from the food court where he's wiping off the tables. Hey, Mac, he says, maybe you should call it a day. I'll close up. Mac yanks on Ruby's chain. She's anchored as a tree trunk. He pulls harder and he falls to his knees. That does it. I'm not playing around, he says as he wipes the sawdust from his jeans. Mac stomps off to his office, and when he returns, he's carrying a long stick, and gleaming hook on the end is almost beautiful, like a silver moon. It's a claw stick. Mac pokes Ruby with a sharp point. Not hard, just a touch. I can tell he wants her to see how much it can hurt. I growl low in my throat. Ruby doesn't budge. She's a gray, unmoving boulder. She closes her eyes, and for a moment, I wonder if she's fallen asleep. I'm warning you. He breathes out, and he stares at the ceiling. Ruby makes a huffing sound. Fine, Mac says. You want to play that way? He draws back the claw stick. No, Julia shouts. I'm not going to hurt her, Mac says. I just want to get her attention. Bob snarls. Mac swings, and the hook slices the air just a few inches above Ruby's head. See, you don't want to mess with me, Mac says, and he draws back the claw stick again. Now move, I said. Ruby jerks her head, and she flings her trunk towards Mac. She makes a noise that sends the sawdust scattering, and it makes my glass shiver. It's the most beautiful mat I have ever seen. Ruby's trunk slaps into Mac. I don't see exactly where she hits him, somewhere below the stomach, I think, and I know he must be uncomfortable because Mac drops the claw stick and falls down on the ground and curls up in a ball and howls like a baby. Direct hit, says Bob. And that's where we will stop our chapter today. Well, tomorrow, Mr. Barry will be reading, starting with Poor Mac.
Yes.
So I will let you guys go because I need